of the best.
Spider-Man, Spider-Man, does whatever a spider can. Spins a web anytime, catches thief just like light. Look out, here comes the Spider-Man. Help me to kill Spider-Man!
Hello everyone, I'm Jeffrey Turner, aka MegaJetty1 of MJ1 Media, and this is my review of Spider-Man: No Way Home. Well, it's here, the film that basically says Ultimate Spider-Man without Ultimate Spider-Man being in the title. That's right, No Way Home is essentially the Ultimate Spider-Man film to date. Reason why I say that? Well, let's take a look and see what it is that makes this film hot. Now, going into this film, I admit I was very nervous, because after all, you're going to touch upon classic villains from previous Spider-Man films that are not tied to this universe. But I will say this, as soon as they started appearing, that's when the movie started getting interesting. And yeah, for the first part of the movie that dealt mostly with the MCU Spider-Man, I admit I was a little annoyed because here we were thinking we were getting away from this stuff. But no, there's still some of that campy MCU type humor, which really is not the best kind of humor, to be honest. I mean, you're trying to do a serious moment only to freaking interrupt it with unnecessary comedy. I mean, that's not what Spider-Man's about. I mean, yeah, Spider-Man has comedy, but not at the expense of the gravitas. I will admit that the use of Doctor Strange in all of this really was interesting. And without getting into spoilers at this moment, I will say that he really did make this film very interesting. Not just because of the fact that his involvement is essentially what creates this whole situation, but also the fact that he is trying to fix it. Him and Peter find themselves at odds about it. Now, the moment we see the Doc Ock character, I will admit it was awesome, because obviously it was the same actor who played him in Spider-Man 2, Alfred Molina. And of course we got the returning talking to the tentacles part. But I will say this, it was even more interesting that he actually remembers events from Spider-Man 2 and recollects them. But Alfred Molina's Doc Ock is not the only returning face we get, and I have to say, without getting into spoilers at this time, it was pretty impressive who else came in. Now I will say this, my main gripe with the MCU Spider-Man films has always been the supporting cast. I mean, Tom Holland, he does a decent job as both Peter Parker and Spider-Man. But my issue was the supporting characters, like MJ, or Michelle Jones as she really is. I won't call her MJ because when I think of MJ, I'm immediately thinking of Mary Jane Watson, gorgeous redhead supermodel wanting to be an actress. And then, of course, there's Ned Leeds, who essentially replaces Harry Osborn as the best friend character, only without all that interesting story drama between Harry and Peter. No, Ned Leeds has to be the goofy, dumb comic relief who can't so much as take anything seriously. And then there's the fact that Ned Leeds is supposed to be, in comics, hinted to be the Hobgoblin. They never thought to imply too much of that in this entire series? Ned Leeds potentially being Hobgoblin, spin-off of the Green Goblin who's trying to kill Spider-Man. They could have worked with that in this. And then, of course, there's Flash Thompson. In this one, they actually gave him blonde hair to try and actually resemble Flash Thompson from the comics. Now, I will admit, that is a decent touch. Make him actually try to look a little more. Though, why didn't they do the same thing with Zendaya and give her the red hair of MJ? They could have at least done that. Try to mesh her character with Mary Jane Watson to create a perfect amalgam almost. And I will say this, the action was pretty spectacular, even amazing. By the end of the film, the story comes to an interesting wrap-up. It was very interesting because it definitely harkened to a very infamous Spider-Man comic that nobody really liked. But it was done much better in this version. It was very well thought out. At the end of the day, Spider-Man No Way Home really should have been called Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, the movie. Because that's essentially what this is. It's essentially the Spider-Verse, but in live action. Not to mention, because it had phenomenal storytelling and even more spectacular and amazing callbacks to previous films, this really should have been called Ultimate Spider-Man, the movie. Even though this movie is titled Spider-Man No Way Home, this movie really hits home in all the right ways possible. In terms of action, I'd rate this movie 9 web shooters out of 10. In terms of story, I'd rate this film 9 Blu-ray discs out of 10. And naturally, in terms of sex appeal, I'd rate this 0 saxes out of 10. Yeah, not much in the way of sex appeal, though I will say there are moments of hotness. And that's in the action and the story. So that deserves maybe an honorary half a saxophone, if that's possible. Overall, I'd rate this movie an A. And with that said, make like a good true believer and keep on webbing. Thwip thwip.